After buying my son and his wife their first home, I overheard her telling someone, "He's just doing it to feel important. We don't owe him anything." I called the realtor the next day and reversed the transfer. When they showed up to move in, the locks had been changed. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Ellen White from London. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I've never been the kind of man who needed much. I worked with my hands, built things people live in, stand in, sleep in. That kind of work. It leaves calluses, yes, but it also gives you something most people don't understand anymore: quiet pride. I never had big ambitions. I didn't chase stock options or corner offices. I chased framing nails and foundation pours. I built a small contracting business after my divorce. Nothing flashy, just enough to keep the lights on and some pride in my name. Ryan, my only son, was 10 when his mother and I split. We shared custody, but I saw him every chance I could. Every soccer game, every science fair, every weekend he'd let me have him. I took him. Maybe that's where it started. This need to show him I was still a provider, even when the marriage broke. I carried a lot of guilt for that, more than I'd ever admit out loud. It became a quiet mission of mine. Make sure Ryan never felt like I gave up on him, no matter what it cost me. When Ryan met Lindsay, he was only 24. I remember the day he brought her by for dinner. She was polite, at least on the surface, pretty in a curated way, like she'd practiced her expressions in the mirror. I watched her pick at the lasagna I'd made, rearranging it more than eating it, and something about the way she smiled at Ryan, just a little too performative, a little too polished, didn't sit right. But I said nothing, not because I was scared of conflict, but because I knew how it sounded coming from a father. "Are you sure about her?" No one ever hears that the way it's meant. It sounds jealous, controlling, out of touch. And maybe I was out of touch. Maybe that's why I kept my mouth shut and focused on being supportive. I helped them move into their first apartment, loaned them my truck, even paid off one of Ryan's credit cards when Lindsay's job fell through. I didn't ask for repayment. I figured I was investing in their stability, investing in him. Over the years, I noticed the way Lindsay's gratitude felt conditional. If I offered help, she'd smile wide and call me the best. If I didn't, or if I hesitated, she'd retreat behind a polite frost. No overt hostility, just enough chill to make her displeasure known. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was reading too much into things. I kept telling myself that love means backing off sometimes. So I backed off. But I watched. I watched the way she handled my son's attention, her constant need to be in control of the narrative, and her subtle eye rolls when I'd offer advice. I wasn't blind. I just didn't know what to do with what I saw. I convinced myself that time would settle it, that if I just stayed generous, stayed useful, she'd come around. And more than anything, I wanted Ryan to feel like I supported his choices, even if I didn't entirely trust them. So when I found the old ranch-style fixer-upper just 10 minutes from where they lived, I saw a chance to do something that felt meaningful. The place had good bones, terrible wiring, crumbling drywall, but a solid foundation. It reminded me of the homes I used to rehab in my early days. I bought it at auction for a fraction of its worth, sunk 2 months of evenings and weekends into it. I didn't tell them what I was doing. I wanted it to be a surprise. I told Ryan I was working a side project. Sometimes Lindsay would comment on how I looked tired lately, with a tone that made it sound less like concern and more like judgment. But I brushed it off. Every nail I drove, every wall I patched, every light fixture I installed. I imagined the look on their faces when I handed over the keys. I imagined their joy, their gratitude, that sense of family pulling together again. It was stupidly romantic, I know, but I had this image of Ryan lifting Lindsay over the threshold while I stood on the porch, proud like a man in an old movie. By the time I finished, the place looked beautiful. Not magazine beautiful, but real. Warm hardwood floors, a kitchen island I built myself, fresh paint in the soft tones Lindsay liked. I even carved a custom wood key plaque with their names burned into it, Ryan and Lindsay. EST 2025. It felt like more than a gift. It felt like an act of legacy. I remember standing in the middle of the living room, alone, just before the reveal. The sun poured through the big front windows and hit the oak I'd laid by hand. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd done something that truly mattered. I'd given them a place to grow, to build, to thrive. A place that said, "You are loved. You are supported. I believe in you." I didn't realize how much I needed them to feel that until it was already built into the walls. I'll never forget the look on Ryan's face when I handed him the key. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Lindsay's reaction was more controlled. She smiled, sure, even teared up a little, but I noticed the way she glanced at Ryan before reacting, like she needed to gauge his response before deciding on hers. Still, she hugged me, said, "You didn't have to do this." I smiled and said, "I wanted to." And I did. But somewhere beneath the pride, a small voice inside me whispered, "You hope this fixes something." I ignored it. I handed them the framed key, told them the house was theirs. They couldn't believe it. I watched Ryan walk room to room, running his hand along the walls like he was in a dream. It felt like one of those rare moments where life aligns, where all the time, money, and effort come back to you in a burst of something good. But goodness is fragile. Sometimes it's only a moment wide. It had been a week since I handed over the keys, and every day after that felt like I was floating. Like I'd done something meaningful that couldn't be undone. Ryan called me twice in those first few days, just to say thank you again. His voice sounded lighter. He said Lindsay had already started picking out paint colors for the nursery. They weren't even expecting yet, but she liked to plan ahead. That part made me smile. I could picture it. Her with a swatch book, Ryan pretending to care, but secretly just happy to see her excited. It felt like I'd built more than a house. I'd built a moment they could build from. And for once, I wasn't the divorced dad on the sidelines. I was part of something. I was needed again. That meant more to me than I ever let on. I stopped by the house a few days later to drop off a few tools I'd left behind. My level, a step stool, some spare tile for the guest bathroom. I didn't announce myself. Thought I'd just swing by, leave the things in the garage, and head out before they even noticed. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw Lindsay standing on the front porch with her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't see me. I had the truck windows down, engine off, so I could hear everything, clear as if I were standing right next to her. She was laughing, but not the light, charming kind. It was sharp, dismissive. "Oh, please," she said into the phone, her voice dripping with that condescending edge I'd learned to pick up on over the years. "He's just doing it to feel important. He needs to feel like we owe him something. But we don't. We never asked for the house." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield like maybe, if I stayed still enough, the words would disappear. But they didn't. They just kept coming. "He's always like that," she continued, trying to buy his way into relevance. "Ryan doesn't see it, but I do. It's sad, honestly." She laughed again. I told Ryan not to get too comfortable. "We don't owe him anything." Then she glanced toward the street, my truck still hidden behind the hedges, and went back inside, doors swinging shut behind her like nothing had happened. I sat there for maybe 5 full minutes, my jaw locked, stomach hollow. The sun was too bright. Everything around me looked warped, like the world had shifted and I was the only one who noticed. I felt something sharp and hot rise in my chest, but I couldn't tell if it was heartbreak or rage. Maybe both. Maybe that was the real betrayal. Not just the words, but how casually she said them. Like I was some sad old man fumbling for relevance. Like my love for my son, my effort, my labor, was pathetic. I wasn't trying to control them. I wasn't trying to earn anything. I just wanted to be part of their lives. I wanted to give them something that made their road a little easier. And maybe, maybe I wanted a little gratitude. Is that so selfish? To hope someone would look at what you've done and say, "This matters to me." I drove home in silence, the tools still in the back seat. I didn't cry. I'm not a crier. But I did something I haven't done in a long time. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, and stared at the wall for what felt like an hour. Just sat there, trying to replay the conversation, trying to figure out if I'd misunderstood something. Twisted it in my mind. But no, she said what she said. And the worst part? She wasn't wrong about everything. I didn't want to feel important. I didn't want to be needed. But not in a manipulative way. Not in the way she made it sound, like I was holding the house over their heads, waiting for some emotional return on investment. That wasn't it. I didn't want repayment. I wanted respect. And in that moment, I realized I didn't have it. Not from her. And maybe not from him either. That night, I pulled out the paperwork. The deed wasn't fully transferred yet. I'd held off finalizing it because I wanted the title to be the cherry on top. A big family dinner, maybe a small toast. I had imagined handing over that last document with a smile, saying, "It's all yours now." Instead, I stared at the blank signature lines, pen in hand, and made a different choice. The next morning, I called the realtor. I told her we weren't moving forward with the transfer. She sounded surprised. "I thought this was a gift for your son." I could hear the hesitation in her voice, like she didn't want to say the wrong thing. I took a breath and said, "Turns out, some gifts don't land the way you think they will." She was quiet for a moment, then said she'd take care of it. By noon, I called a locksmith and had the locks changed. It felt cold, petty even, but I kept hearing her voice in my head. "We don't owe him anything." I figured if that's how they saw it, then fine. They didn't know me, and I didn't owe them a house. I took the framed key I had made, the one I'd put so much hope into, and left it on the living room floor with a short note. Every key tells a story. This one's just a souvenir now. I didn't wait for them to find it. I locked up, dropped the spare at the realtor's office, and went home. My hands shook the whole drive back. And then came the waiting. I knew it wouldn't be long before they showed up. They had plans to start moving in that weekend. The truck was probably already rented. I sat on my porch the next afternoon, a cold beer in hand, watching the sky go from blue to gray as clouds rolled in. And sure enough, around 3 p.m., I got the text from Ryan. "Dad, the locks won't work." Did something happen? I didn't respond. I watched the phone buzz again. Then again. The third text was more frantic. "Are you home? Did you sell the house? What's going on?" I waited 5 minutes, then finally replied, "We'll talk soon." That was it. No explanation. No apologies. I wasn't ready to explain myself yet. I wasn't sure if I even needed to. The silence that followed those first few texts didn't last long. That night, my phone lit up over and over again. Calls from Ryan, voicemails stacking one after another. At first, they were just confused. "Hurt, maybe." "Dad, I don't understand," one of them said. "Just call me back, please." But as the hours ticked by and I didn't respond, the tone shifted. The next one had more edge. "Seriously, what the hell is going on? Did you change the locks? Is this some kind of joke?" Then came the one that stuck with me, the one where Ryan's voice cracked halfway through. "You really went behind our backs?" After everything, he sounded like someone who'd just realized the world was not as safe or as predictable as he thought. Like he couldn't reconcile the man who raised him with the man who'd suddenly pulled the rug out from under his feet. And even though I stood by what I'd done, that voicemail, that one, sat heavy on my chest for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, rhythmic circles, the room too hot, even with the window cracked open. My mind was loud, spiraling in a loop of justification and guilt and anger. Was I being cruel? Was I punishing them? Or was I finally putting myself first? I thought about Lindsay's voice on that porch, so sharp and certain, like I was just some sad man craving attention. I thought about her voice sharpened. "You had no right. No right to make us feel safe and then rip that away. We didn't ask for the house. You offered. So don't twist this like we wronged you." Then the line went dead. I stood in the garage, staring at my phone like it had slapped me. Her words echoed. "You had no right." That's when I finally felt the heat in my chest boil over. No right. After all I'd done? After all I'd given? I poured a whiskey and stood by the back door, staring into the dusk like it might offer answers. That's when Janine showed up, my closest friend, someone I'd known since high school. She and her husband lived 2 blocks away, and she'd heard the news through the grapevine. Of course she had. Family gossip travels faster than wildfire. She walked in without knocking, as always, holding 2 takeout containers and a bottle of red wine. "I figured you weren't eating," she said, setting it down. "So let's talk." I didn't argue. We sat at the kitchen table, plastic forks in hand, and for a moment we just ate in silence. Then she looked up at me with those eyes that always cut past the surface. "Did you do this for them? Or did you do it for you? The question stung more than I expected. I tried to dodge it, talk about what Lindsay said, how disrespectful it was, how ungrateful. But Janine didn't flinch. I'm not saying she's right. I'm saying, were you hoping this would fix something in you? That part landed hard. Because the truth was, yes, I had hoped this would fix something. Not just with Ryan, but with the past. With all the years I felt sidelined after the divorce. With all the holidays I spent alone while Ryan bounced between houses. I had built that home not just for them, but for a version of myself that still believed I could be the provider. The rock. And when Lindsay mocked that, she cracked more than just my pride. She cracked the illusion that love alone could fix what time had eroded. The next morning, I sent one final text to Ryan. I hope someday you'll understand why I did what I did. I love you. But love without respect is a one-way street. That was it. I didn't hit send and then stare at the screen, waiting. I sent it and put the phone down. No more calls. No more explanations. I'd said my piece. Whether he believed me or not, that was on him. The locks had been changed. The house was no longer theirs. And the key, the one they'd framed so proudly, just a souvenir now. A story half-written, abruptly closed. The morning after I sent that last message to Ryan, I turned my phone off. Not out of cowardice, but out of necessity. There's a difference. I knew what was coming. The silence wouldn't last. People talk, especially when the lines between family and scandal blur. I expected confusion, maybe even anger from those closest to Ryan. What I didn't expect was how quickly it all went from a private decision to a full-blown character assassination. Janine was the first to warn me. She called from her shop downtown, her voice clipped and cautious. Someone's been talking, she said. You might want to brace yourself. And then she read it to me, word for word. Lindsay's post. It was on Facebook, of course. That old platform where grudges go to be made public. She didn't name me outright, but she didn't have to. Her words were calculated, sharp like a scalpel. We were given a house. Or at least, we thought we were. Turns out, when people give you things with strings attached, they'll yank them back the moment you stop performing gratitude. Lesson learned. Not all generosity is pure. Some of it is control dressed up as kindness. The comments underneath read like a chorus of uninformed outrage. Wow, that's disgusting, one woman wrote. You guys deserve better. Another said, cut toxic people off. Even family. Especially family. I sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling, rereading the post until the words lost meaning. I felt like I'd been sucker punched in the chest by someone half my size, someone who'd weaponized the very thing I'd been most proud of. By noon, I'd gotten 2 texts from my sister asking if everything was okay and whether what she'd heard through the grapevine was true. An uncle called but didn't leave a voicemail. A family friend I hadn't spoken to in a year sent a cryptic message. Hope you're hanging in there. People are quick to judge what they don't understand. That part stuck with me, because that's exactly what this felt like. Judgment without context. Lindsay had taken a scalpel to my character and sliced it into digestible pieces for public consumption. And Ryan? Not a word. Not a call. Not even a rebuttal in the comments. His silence was the loudest betrayal of all. It said everything. He either agreed with her or was too afraid to push back. Either way, I was alone now in a storm I didn't start. I finally turned my phone back on that evening, and the voicemails hit like a wave. Ryan had left 5 in total. The first was a rehash of what he'd already texted, confused, wounded, trying to understand. The second and third came after Lindsay's post went live, and the tone changed. Dad, you had no right, he snapped. I don't care what you think you heard. That was our home. You gave it to us. You don't get to take it back because you're hurt. The fourth one broke me in half. His voice was lower, more tired. You always do this. Make everything about you. You act like you're the victim, but you left a key on the floor like it was a joke. You humiliated us. And then the fifth, almost whispered, I don't even know who you are anymore. That one replayed in my head for hours. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout back through the phone. You don't know who I am? I'm the man who built you a house with his bare hands. I'm the man who showed up to every game, every graduation, every heartbreak you ever had. I'm the man who never asked you for anything except a little respect. But what good would that have done? He wasn't listening. Not really. He was caught in Lindsay's current now, pulled along by her need to be the victim, to rewrite the story in a way that made her untouchable. I'd become a villain in someone else's narrative, and the more I tried to defend myself, the more villainous I looked. I didn't answer any of the voicemails. I couldn't. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from absence, but from exhaustion. From knowing that nothing you say will be heard with clear ears. Janine came over again that night, this time with 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon that had been aging in her cabinet since the Obama years. We sat on my back porch, watching the October leaves collect in uneven piles along the grass. She didn't try to offer solutions. She just listened. And after a long pause, she said, "You know, I think the hardest part isn't losing them. It's realizing they were never really with you to begin with." That sentence hit harder than she probably meant it to. It lingered, echoed, because somewhere deep down, I'd known it too. The next few days were a blur. The gossip spread further, beyond just family. A few neighbors even brought it up under the guise of friendly concern. "Heard some drama with your son's house," one said with a nervous chuckle. "Y'all patching things up soon?" I smiled politely, gave a non-answer, then excused myself. I couldn't take it. The whispers, the half-truths, the pity. I started taking long drives in the evenings, just to clear my head. No destination, just empty roads and music low enough to hear myself think. On one of those drives, I found myself pulling into the driveway of the house again, out of habit, or maybe just masochism. I didn't get out of the truck. I just sat there and stared at the dark windows, the curtains still hanging inside. Nobody had touched them. That's when it hit me. They never moved in. They never got to. All their plans, their boxes, their new furniture, none of it had crossed that threshold. I'd interrupted their story before it even began. And while a part of me felt justified, another part, small but loud, wondered if I'd overcorrected. Had I done the right thing? Or had I acted from a place of pain disguised as principle? I didn't have the answer. Still don't. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. The locks were changed. The key was meaningless now, and the fallout was still unfolding. The funny thing about family drama is how quickly it becomes public theater. You think it'll stay behind closed doors, whispered in hallways, maybe argued about over dinner, but no. People love a spectacle, especially when it's someone else's unraveling. Within a week, my name became shorthand for bitterness. "Oh, that's the dad who took the house back," someone said at the grocery store, not realizing I was 2 feet away picking out canned tomatoes. I didn't say anything, just kept walking, pushing my cart through the aisle like I didn't hear. But I heard. I always heard. You don't put your whole self into a gift and then walk away clean when it's rejected. It sticks to you, like sawdust in your lungs. You can cough it out, but it lingers. I started noticing the shift everywhere. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Bailey, who used to wave at me every time I came home, she stopped. Just looked away like she didn't want to get involved. At the hardware store, the guy behind the counter who'd always ask about my projects suddenly turned formal. Distant. Like I was radioactive. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then Janine came by one evening with a copy of the local free press folded under her arm, and my gut told me before she even spoke. "You're not going to like this," she said, handing me the paper. And there it was, a full-blown community column titled, "When Generosity Turns Toxic, The Hidden Costs of Family Strings." Lindsay, of course. She'd been interviewed anonymously, but the details were unmistakable. A young couple, promised a home by a well-meaning but ultimately controlling father, finds themselves locked out, emotionally and literally. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Controlling father. I repeated, more to myself than to Janine. That's what I am now. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. I crumpled the paper, then smoothed it out again. Couldn't decide whether to throw it away or frame it as a cautionary tale. The worst part wasn't the article. It was the realization that this was how people were going to remember it. Not the hours I spent rebuilding that kitchen. Not the weekends I gave up to sand the floors. Not the love behind a gesture. Just the fallout. The rumor. The drama. It all came to a head at my cousin Angela's birthday party. One of those obligatory family gatherings I would have skipped if I hadn't promised to show up months ago. I told myself I'd go for an hour, keep my head down, say happy birthday, and leave before anyone got drunk enough to bring it up. That plan lasted about 15 minutes. I walked in and immediately felt the shift in energy. Conversations paused. Eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. A few forced smiles. A couple of polite nods. I made my way to the buffet table and poured myself a soda just to keep my hands busy. That's when my Aunt Carla swooped in. "You know," she began, voice syrupy but sharp. "It would have been a lot simpler if you just talked to them. All this sneaking around and drama." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air like smoke. I didn't answer. I'd learned by now that some people don't want explanations, they want confessions. She gave me a tight smile. "They're hurting, you know. Ryan especially." I nodded slowly, then looked her square in the eyes. "I know, but so am I." That seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked, then gave a soft, pitying sigh and walked away. I watched her go, feeling that old weight settle back onto my shoulders. The one that always shows up when people expect you to apologize for doing what was necessary. Not long after, I stepped outside to get some air, and that's when I saw him, Ryan. He was standing by the fence, drink in hand, talking to our cousin Leo. I froze for a second, debating whether to go back inside. But then he saw me. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, everything went quiet. No party noise, no voices, just the two of us, stuck in the kind of moment that feels too heavy for words. I walked over slowly, unsure what I'd even say. But when I got within 10 feet, he turned his back to me. Just like that. Turned away, like I was a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong yard. That broke something in me. I stood there a few seconds longer, hoping, foolishly, that he'd change his mind, that he'd turn back around, even just to glare. But he didn't. So I left, drove home with the windows down, the cold air burning my skin. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow, like I'd finally reached the end of something I hadn't wanted to admit was over. And that night, for the first time since this whole thing began, I packed up every photo I had of Ryan and me from the last 10 years. Birthdays, graduations, holidays. I didn't throw them away, just boxed them up. Out of sight, not out of mind. I needed the distance. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. A real letter, handwritten, no return address. I almost tossed it, assuming it was junk. But when I opened it, I saw the neat cursive of my cousin Diana, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The letter was short, just a single page, but it said more than any voicemail or post ever could. "I heard what happened," she wrote, "and I just want you to know I get it. I gave too much once, too. It doesn't make you cruel. It makes you human. Sometimes setting boundaries looks like betrayal to people who only ever saw your love as utility." That line, "who only ever saw your love as utility," cut deep. It also gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: peace. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wasn't the villain. Maybe I was just someone who'd hit a limit he didn't know he had. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. Grief doesn't always come wrapped in black. Sometimes it shows up in a cardboard box at the back of your closet, filled with photos you're not ready to look at and memories that sting more than they comfort. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence. No calls, no messages, no apologies. And sometimes it comes with a strange sense of calm. That's what I felt in the weeks that followed. Not rage, not bitterness, just stillness. The kind that settles after a storm has torn through your life and left everything rearranged. The phone stopped buzzing. The whispers slowed. Even Lindsay's social media posts faded into more generic content, brunches and inspirational quotes, all scrubbed clean of conflict. I guess once the drama stopped getting engagement, it wasn't worth milking anymore. But the damage had already been done. I didn't expect reconciliation. That's not what I was looking for. What I wanted, what I needed, was space and clarity. And both of those came, slowly but surely. I found them in the quiet routines of my day. Fixing up a new project house, not for anyone else this time, but for myself. Long walks with Janine, who stayed as steady as ever, always knowing when to speak and when to just let me vent. I even started cooking again. Real meals, not just sandwiches and takeout. There was something grounding about seasoning a roast or baking bread, about creating something that was mine, that didn't need to be approved or accepted by anyone else. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not through my son's life or his choices. One morning, I pulled that old framed key out of the drawer where I'd stashed it. The one I'd left on the living room floor of the house before I changed the locks. I'd kept it, not out of sentimentality, but because I didn't know what else to do with it. It was too personal to throw away, too loaded to keep on display. But that day, I looked at it differently. Not as a symbol of failure, but of understanding. That key represented the version of me who believed love meant sacrifice without limit, who believed that giving was the answer to everything, and that giving is only beautiful when it's received with respect. Otherwise, it becomes martyrdom. And I'm not a martyr. Not anymore. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I rehung the key, this time in my own office, above my desk. I mounted it in a new frame with a small plaque beneath it that simply read, "Not owed, not regretted." Because as painful as this entire ordeal had been, I didn't regret building that house. I didn't regret the hours, the money, or the hope I poured into it. What I regretted was the assumption that love and gratitude were the same thing. They're not. Love can be given freely. But gratitude? That has to be chosen. It can't be coerced. And if it doesn't come naturally, no amount of kindness can pull it out of someone who doesn't want to give it. I hadn't spoken to Ryan since that last text. Part of me wondered if I ever would. And I'd made peace with that, mostly. But then one afternoon, weeks later, I got an email. No subject line, just his name in the sender field. I opened it with a shaky hand, heart thudding against my ribs like it had been waiting for this moment. The message was short, just 2 lines. "I don't agree with how you handled it, but I think I understand why you did it. I'm still angry, but I'm listening." That was all. No apologies. No invitations to talk. Just a door cracked open, barely. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't rush through it. I didn't reply right away. I didn't craft a speech. I just sat with it, let it exist. Because sometimes healing doesn't come in a single conversation. Sometimes it starts in the space between sentences. After that, I kept living. Not waiting. Living. I took a solo trip upstate, stayed in a cabin for a few days, chopped my own firewood, and read old paperbacks by lantern light. I turned off my phone. I stared out at the trees and let myself feel the weight of everything. What I lost, what I kept, and what I finally let go of. I didn't cry, but I did breathe differently. Deeper. Slower. Like something inside me had loosened its grip. On the final night, I sat by the fire and whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "You did what you had to do." And I believed it. When I got back home, Janine dropped by with a new houseplant. "It's a rubber tree," she said. "Hard to kill." I figured that was symbolic. We laughed, and I set it by the window. It looked good there. Alive. Resilient. Just like me. The days rolled on, and though Ryan and I didn't speak again right away, that email stayed with me. It meant the door wasn't completely shut, but I wasn't waiting for it to swing open either. For once, I was okay standing on my side, knowing I hadn't burned the bridge. I just stopped walking toward people who refused to meet me halfway. And that's what this story really became about in the end. Not the house, not the key, not even the betrayal, but the boundary. The moment I said, "Enough." Not out of revenge or spite, but out of self-respect. People will call it petty. They'll say I overreacted, that I should have forgiven quietly, given more, stayed soft. But they weren't the ones being diminished. They weren't the ones being laughed at behind their backs for daring to care too much. And if standing up for myself makes me the villain in someone else's story, so be it. I'm not here to be worshipped. I'm here to be well. If this story hit home for you, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace or keeping your dignity, leave a comment and share your story. Don't let anyone shame you for drawing the line. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no more. If you felt this, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real-life stories about boundaries, betrayal, and taking your power back. See you soon in the next one.